The bells of St. Jude's didn't just ring, they commanded. Every Sunday at precisely 8:45 a.m., Arthur Vance stood at the oak doors, his suit pressed so sharply it looked like it could cut glass. To the congregation, Arthur was the bedrock of the community, a man whose morality was as unshakable as the stone pillars of the nave. He handled the church's outreach funds with a transparency that bordered on the divine. But as the choir's voices rose in a practiced harmony, Arthur's mind was always miles away, locked inside a digital vault that no prayer could reach. The secret wasn't just what he was hiding, it was the fact that the man everyone bowed to was a carefully constructed ghost. It began 3 years ago, during a particularly grueling winter when the church's heating system failed and the local shelter was overflowing. Arthur, tasked with the restoration fund, found himself staring at a ledger that didn't add up. Most men would have panicked or reported the discrepancy. Arthur, however, saw a glitch in the matrix, a way to create a shadow version of his life that required no permission from God or the law. He opened the first account under the name Lazarus Holdings, a private offshore digital wallet that existed only in the ether of encrypted servers. At first, it was a safety net, a few $100s skimmed from the discretionary pot that no one ever audited because no one dared to question a man who spent his Tuesday nights scrubbing floors at the soup kitchen. But secrets have a way of breathing. They grow, they demand more space, and soon the shadow was larger than the man casting it. By the second year, the secret account had become Arthur's true religion. While the pastor spoke of tithing and the virtues of poverty, Arthur was watching a screen in his basement, his eyes reflecting the neon green glow of high-frequency trading. He wasn't just stealing, he was optimizing. He had developed an algorithm that moved the church's stagnant building fund through a series of short-term, high-risk liquidity pools. By Monday morning, the money was back in the church's account, untouched, but the interest, the ghost profit, slipped silently into Lazarus Holdings. He told himself it was victimless. The church still had its money, and he had his freedom. But the cost of a secret isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the slow erosion of the soul. He stopped looking people in the eye. He became a master of the pious nod, a gesture that looked like deep thought, but was actually a mental calculation of his current BTC holdings. His wife, Martha, noticed the change, though she attributed it to the weight of his service. She would bring him tea in the study, never realizing that the spreadsheets he scrambled to hide weren't for the upcoming bake sale, but for a life he was planning without her. The account was now worth millions, a staggering sum that made the humble life he led feel like a restrictive costume. He was a king living in a cottage, a wolf dressed as the shepherd. The tension snapped on a rainy Tuesday in late November. A young auditor, fresh out of university and full of the kind of zeal Arthur used to possess, was brought in by the diocese for a routine check. Arthur greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He sat the boy down in the cold church office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and incense. As the boy's fingers danced over the keys, Arthur felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. "Mr. Vance," said the boy, squinting at a transaction from 6 months ago. "There's a 3-second delay in the wire transfer logs here. It looks like the funds left the account at 11:59:57 and returned at 12:001. Why would a manual transfer happen at midnight?" Arthur didn't blink. He explained it away as a server lag from the rural bank they used, but the seed was planted. That night, Arthur didn't pray. He went to the secret account. He saw the balance, $4.2 million. It was enough to disappear. He could be in a villa in Montenegro by the time the sun hit the stained glass on Sunday. But as he looked at the exit button, he realized the most terrifying truth of all. He didn't want the money. He wanted the secret. He wanted the thrill of being the only person in a room of 500 people who knew the truth. He was addicted to the hypocrisy. The final Sunday, the air in the church felt different. The auditor was sitting in the third row, not with a hymnal, but with a notebook. Arthur stood at the pulpit to give the monthly financial report. He looked out at the faces, the widows who gave their last pennies, the families who looked to him for guidance, and he felt a surge of power so intense it was almost nauseating. He began to speak, his voice steady and warm. "Wealth is not what we keep," he told them, "but what we give away in silence." As he spoke, he reached into his pocket and felt the cold plastic of the hardware wallet that held the Lazarus account. He had planned to confess, or perhaps to flee, but instead, he did something worse. He announced a new initiative, an internal audit transparency program led by himself. He watched the young auditor's face soften into a look of admiration. He had just hidden the secret by putting it in a glass box and calling it a diamond. Arthur realized then that the secret account wasn't just a digital wallet, it was his legacy. He would die as a saint, buried in a suit paid for by the sins no one would ever find. He stepped down from the pulpit, the choir began to sing, and for the first time in years, Arthur Vance sang along, his voice the loudest in the room, perfectly in tune with a lie that had become his only truth. The final realization hit him as he shook the auditor's hand at the door. The boy apologized for his suspicion, citing Arthur's bravery in calling for an audit. Arthur smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. He understood now how the world works. People don't want the truth, they want the comfort of believing in someone who claims to have it. The secret account remained, growing in the dark, a silent monument to the fact that the most dangerous men aren't the ones in the shadows, but the ones standing in the light, holding the collection plate. Arthur went home, kissed his wife, and opened his laptop. He didn't check the balance. He just watched the numbers pulse, the heartbeat of a ghost that was more alive than the man himself.